please answer our first poll question to give us an idea if you're new to the program or not, and which priority or priorities you are interested in. Okay. And we're back. Thank you very much for filling in our poll. As you can see on your screen, a little over half of you are new to the program, which means you may have some extra questions about the program itself. So always remember you can put your questions to us in the chat function over to the right, and during the Q&A session after the presentation, we will be happy to answer those. In addition, we can always take your questions after the webinar via email or phone. It also seems that over half of you are interested in priority 2 and priority 1 and priority 2. We will be presenting the priorities and the funding left in each of those in just a few minutes. Just to clear up all the logistical issues, this presentation will be in English, the Q&A as well. You can ask questions at any time in the chat function, but they will only be answered during the Q&A session after the presentation. If any of the questions are not answered during the session because we have too many or we need to check on the answers, we will do that afterwards and upload them to our website. We will also be asking 2 more poll questions after the presentation, so please participate. It gives us a better idea of who you are, our audience. In fact, we would like to start by asking if you could just put in the chat function your name and the organization you represent so that we have an idea of who you are, because obviously we cannot hear you, you can hear us. So, a couple of important pieces of information. We have 2 calls coming up, calls 9 and 10. Those calls open on January 2nd of next year. Call 9 is for full applications based on a first stage application submitted this year, so that is not as relevant to you, our audience. Call 10 is the call that you should be focusing on if you're interested in applying to our program. Call 10 is for our first stage of applications called the expression of interest, and this call opens on the 2nd of January next year and closes on the 8th of April. It is the last call for our first stage of applications that will allow for projects that run a full 3 years. So please keep that in mind. Also, prior to giving you the funding that is available in our different priorities, know that we will be having a meeting where there will be some current outstanding project applications decided on. So this funding that we will be talking about in a minute will actually be reduced across the priorities as new applications are approved. That will be happening in a couple of weeks, so stay tuned after that meeting for the up-to-date funding limits. And now I will turn to our presentation. And we are getting a few answers over here. Maya from the Green Economy Research Center of the University of Aberdeen, welcome. Again, I'm Sarah, and my colleague Christopher are here, and we will go on to the next, yes. Give you a very general introduction to the program, tell you how much funding is left, and introduce our national contact point, who unfortunately could not be with us today, but she serves a very important function in our program. We'll explain that in a minute. So, without further ado, our program is the North Sea Region Program, and we are functioning in a program period that lasts from 2014 to 2020. This does not mean that projects have to be finished by 2020. Projects can run through the spring of 2023, just for your information. However, the official period is until 2020. We have 7 partner countries involved. You can see those in our map here. And we have a steering committee which makes the decisions on our project applications and distribution of funding. Again, our next meeting will be in 2 weeks. And finally, we operate according to 4 priorities, 4 themes under which we give funding. And I will now turn over to Christopher.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So for the first priority, first of the 4 priorities, we have thinking growth. So that is what we normally refer to as our investment priority. And examples within this priority is general innovation projects. It could also be capacity building. So when we talk about capacity building, we could be thinking about the triple helix approach with the public authorities, an SME perhaps, and then some educational institutions involved. For this priority, we have approximately 16.4 million euros left in ERDF. The second of our 4 priorities is eco-innovation. So that is our green energy priority, we would probably call it. Examples within this priority is circular economy, sustainable energy production. It could also be the sustainable transition or the transition in energy production. And then we have the green innovation measures. For this priority, we have 23.4 million euros left. For priority 3, that's the sustainable North Sea region. As you can see, the amount of funding currently is rather low. However, before we go into the examples, it should be mentioned that our monitoring committee has just at the last meeting approved to allocate an additional 7 million euros in ERDF for climate change adaptation projects. However, this is depending on an approval from the Commission. In terms of examples within this priority, we have flood risk management, we have climate adaptation projects, and general projects on preserving the environment. The last of the 4 priorities are the green transport and mobility priority. For this priority, we have approximately 15.8 million euros left in ERDF funding. And the examples within this priority in terms of projects could be green transport solutions, so either testing these solutions already developed in terms of green transport solutions, or developing new solutions. It could be improved transport and logistics solutions, and then it could be projects looking at removing bottlenecks. And with bottlenecks, we also think about the congestion issue. So we really try to maximize the effects on the infrastructure that we have available in the region. Just as a final remark to our 4 priorities and the funding left, and it's very important for me to underline that we have an upcoming steering committee meeting in December, where decisions will be taken on call 7 and 8 applications, which will lower the amounts available as you have been displayed this presentation. For you of the attendants that are living in the UK, then we have what we refer to as our national contact point in the UK. That is, her name is Vanessa Pilley. She is employed at DCLG, as far as I remember, and her role is bridging the way from the national level to the program level. So when you are looking for specific UK partners, then she would definitely be one of the persons to involve in terms of, because she has quite an extensive knowledge about the UK partners. And it could also be if you are in doubt about certain national legislation or rules, then Vanessa is also the person to get in contact with. And her contact details can be found on our website. So that's at northsearegion.eu.
And just for your information, there are contact points in 6 of our 7 member states. Denmark, we at the Joint Secretariat serve as the contact point in Denmark, but all of the countries have national contact points. So if you had questions about any of the rules or getting partners in the other countries, you could also contact them. They are also on our website. So we have an exciting event coming up, Christopher, don't we?
We do indeed.
Yes.
So hopefully after this session today, you will be thinking, I have this brilliant idea. I simply need to meet up with some clever people from other countries, from other organizations, and then we can build a project project together.
Yes.
And for that purpose, we have this event in January 16, 17 in Den Haag, where you as potential applicants for Hall 9 and 10 are invited to be both inspired and, as I mentioned previously, to network with other potential applicants. From the perspective of the program, then we really encourage you to attend this event, because we can give you some deeper insights into, for example, how does the application form looks, what should you focus on. When we talk about intervention logic, what do we mean, and how should you apply it in the real world?
Exactly. And we also give one-on-one feedback to those who are interested in presenting a project idea or a first stage application that's moving to the second stage. So you will have direct contact with us from the Joint Secretariat and the national contact points at this event. It is free of charge, and when we finish this session, you will have a direct link to the registration. And that brings us to our next poll, in fact. We would like to know from you, just a second, whether you have a project idea in mind, or you might be actually in the process of writing an application. So have a look at these questions and please answer them. There are 2, right?
And then perhaps as soon as you're done with answering this the survey, just start putting in your questions to us.
Yes, at any time you may put your questions into the chat function, and once we start the Q&A session, we will answer them one by one. So please fill in this poll that you see in front of you and enter any questions you might have for us over in the chat function. And in about 1 minute, we will close this poll and we will start on the questions and answers.
thank you so much for all of your replies. It's really good to see that at least some of you do have an idea in mind, and for you that do not have an idea in mind at this stage, I guess it's because that you're still interested in to see what our program can do for you, and for that reason, I think it's again highly relevant that you participate in our Interwork event, or if you see a national event coming up.
Because at the Interwork, not only will you be able to work on or find out about applying, but we will also have a session where you can present your idea and get feedback on it and see if it will fly with our program or if there are potential partners out there. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's a great event for that too.
Yeah. Having said that, I think that we should go to the Q&A part.
Yeah.
So I think that this question reads, so is the Interwork event only for those with a project idea? And I think you mentioned it, Sarah, but perhaps you could just repeat it.
Sure. This event is for both people who have a project idea but not yet an application, and for those who have written an expression of interest, which is our first stage of the two-stage application process, and will be going to the full application stage. Again, we have a meeting in 2 weeks where expressions of interest that have been submitted will be decided on, and they will find out soon after whether they've been successful or not, and we invite those people to come to this event to learn about how to go into the second stage. There will also be people who have applied prior but didn't come forward with their second stage for some reason. They are also invited to this event. And again, we would welcome those who have project ideas and want to further develop them. So I hope that answers your question, Fiona. If not, please let us know.
So if we could repeat the name of the UK contact point.
That was already answered, but maybe just to put it out there once more.
Vanessa Pilley is the name of the UK national contact point, and you can find her email address and her phone number on the North Sea Region website.
So we, when you registered, we got this question: what is the level of contribution required? And I'm trying to, or I'm actually just interpreting a little bit on the question, because what I think there should be raised of question here is, so what is the match funding rate? So how much do you fund as a program? And we fund 50%. So when you have an activity, you have to come with 50% of the funding for that activity, and we will provide the other 50%.
Exactly. Just a second, we're putting Vanessa's email address straight into the chat function. Only one M. Yep. Sorry. Where is it? Only one M? For Vanessa. Oh, yeah. That's. So we've put Vanessa's email address into the chat function for those of you who would like to write to her directly.
It might be a bit difficult to see. It's blue on blue, at least for us, but you can copy paste it from there.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. Yes. Okay. Is there any possibility for beach and shore erosion control projects? This would probably fit within our priority 3. However, as we said prior, at this moment, there's very little money in priority 3, and we are hoping for about 7 million additional euros in this priority, because it is basically we've run out of funding because there have been so many good project applications in it. That being said, this is a good general area that would fall under that priority.
But I think it was also, we actually covered this question already in one of our previous webinars today. That was in the Danish one. And the advice from our colleague Axel was also to look into the catalog of already approved projects to see what is going on in that field currently. and from that you could build an idea.
Good point, because we don't want to double fund projects that do the exact same thing.
I think it's generally a good idea to look into the catalog of already approved projects,
Yes.
also to get an idea of what we have been funding so far and what is possible, what is still missing, and to see whether there's a gap for your research project.
You can find all of the projects that are currently funded on our website. It's called the project database, and that is by priority. So it's quite easy to find the projects that are currently running. And the question, is hydroponic farming applicable in the North Sea region? First, the most important point to make on this one is that generally agriculture projects are a bit difficult in our program because we have,
and also
aquaculture, that's right, aquaculture and agriculture, because we cannot fund the creation of agricultural products. It goes against the rules of the program. So depending on exactly what you want to do and what the project would focus on, we could talk about it, let's put it that way, but not necessarily something that we would be able to fund.
So if you have any more questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Just as a remark to, we talked about the project catalog a few minutes earlier. And if you are interested in seeing what we have of running projects currently, just go to projects.northsearegion.eu, and that will take you to our project database.
We would like to give you a bit of, oh, here's another question. What is the difference between your role, the project theme advisors, and that of the national contact point? I was under the impression that we had to work through the NCP. Okay, that's a good question. You can address either us as project advisors or the national contact point. There is a point at which we cannot discuss project ideas or project applications with our applicants. And that is when a call, if you have a project idea you want to discuss with us, we cannot talk about those with you when a call opens. So from when a call opens until when the call closes, we cannot do that. But the national contact point can. In addition, if you have questions about your application, we can take questions at the Joint Secretariat up to 3 weeks before a call closes, at which point we cannot answer any more questions about content, but we can take technical questions. However, the national contact point can, up until the deadline, answer questions. So I hope that clarifies for you the difference between us. Again, as Christopher already said, the national contact point knows much better the rules of the UK or the various specific country, and they also know much better the network of partners that's available, whereas we're more generalists in that sense. Anything you can think of to add?
I think in terms of adding, then it's, without getting into too much detail, then what we do at the Secretariat is that we actually focus on implementing the program as agreed upon by the Commission. So we have this cooperation program that sort of established the framework for what we're doing here. So that is our main goal, that is to achieve the targets that we have set out for the program, so meaning the 49 regions that we represent. Whereas the NCPs, they as Sarah also mentioned, they have a more, how would you say, more narrow role in terms of focusing on maximizing the benefits and efforts of their member state.
Exactly. But again, we are all available to you as a resource, but the national contact point has a little bit more flexibility in terms of the times that they can respond to your questions and talk with you.
But perhaps just mentioning that, because the question was also if they have to work through the NCP, and I think you perhaps already covered that, but just to be very clear, that it's not a requirement.
No, absolutely not. You can come directly to us. Is there a minimum of consortium partners? The answer is no. But there is a number. There's a minimum partner countries.
There is, yeah, actually.
Yeah. So it's 2.
Per regulation, it's 2 countries or 2 beneficiaries from 2 countries working together. However, we strongly encourage that our project consortiums are larger than that, because we just know from experience that even though that we have this very limited minimum requirement, it takes, I would say, 4 or 5 partner countries working together before a project is approved.
Yeah, exactly. So is there a certain level of contribution when it comes to the different sectors that are involved? We take and encourage organizations from every sector into our projects. Projects must be led by a public organization, but we have lots of projects that have NGOs, universities, private sector, public sector, anything else? Those are the main bodies that participate, and there is no, there's no magic formula for what percentage should be this and what percentage should be that. It needs to be a balance. It needs to make sense within the context of the project.
And since we are very focused on piloting the ideas that the project has, I think it's also so important to underline that, of course, if you have a project idea working or focusing on enhancing the capacities of SMEs, then we sort of expect you to also involve SMEs in your project.
Yeah, absolutely. Or if there's a topic for the project that requires some research, then we expect that there's going to be at least one university or research institution involved. Okay, so again, if you have any further questions, we will be happy to answer those via email or phone after the webinar. We will also list these questions on the website with their answers. Just to give you an idea of the timeline for the Call 10 projects, which, as we emphasized at the beginning, is the kind of key call coming up. Call 10 is for expressions of interest. Expressions of interest are first stage applications, so they're kind of a mini version of a full application. If you apply in Call 10, which means you submit your project application by the deadline of 8th of April next year, you can expect a response to that by June of next year, sometime in June. You will then, if approved, be able to work on your second stage application, which is called the full application. And that call will open at the end of June next year and run through the 1st of October. Once we have a meeting on those applications in December of 2019, your project would be able to start roughly January of 2020. So that is the timeline you're looking at to start a project that will begin with a first stage application in January to April. And we have one last question for you, one poll. So this was our first attempt in the North Sea Region program to use webinars to communicate with project community, with newcomers to the program and so forth. And we'd like to know if you'd be interested in further, more specific or detailed or specialized webinars in the future. If that would be helpful. And yeah, I think that's good. It looks like, oh, great. Okay. Super. Yeah, that's a resounding yes, it looks like, huh?
It does really, yeah.
Yes, that's super. Good to know.
Well, we're looking forward to train our skills in doing the webinars.
Yes, we will continue practicing.
Yes.
I think that's a good idea. Thank you very much for joining us. Again, our Interwork event coming up in January. We're very, very excited to welcome you there. And you'll go straight to that from the link when we close the webinar. Feel free to ask us questions after the webinar. Anything?
No, I just hope that I see you all at Interwork.
Yes, we hope to see you there. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for listening. Bye.